Darth Vader. When you see him, you usually think of three things: his breathing, his size, and most of all, his armor. For over 20 years, Vader was encased into this prison of a suit and lived each and every day in pain and suffering. But just how many pieces to his suit were there, and how did they all work together to keep him alive? Well, in this video, we're gonna break down every single piece of Vader's armor and answer the mystery once and for all. So let's get right into it. The helmet. Starting off with the most recognizable part of Vader's armor, we have the helmet. Now, if you've ever looked at Vader's helmet and thought it looked terrifying, that wasn't by accident. Vader's armor, especially his helmet, was purposely designed to be intimidating, drawing inspiration from ancient Sith war armor and long-forgotten Sith droids. Its skull-like shape was meant to strike fear instantly, and it's safe to say it worked, even on his own officers. Now, taking a closer look at the helmet itself, it was actually built into two main sections. The first was the face mask, and the second was the outer helmet that surrounded it. To hold everything together, a raised central ridge ran between Vader's eyes all the way to the back of the helmet. This ridge was reinforced with layered materials like durasteel, obsidian, and plasteel. Some sources even claim that these metals were strengthened using dark side alchemy. Now, you'll also notice two additional ridges above Vader's eye lenses. These ridges emphasize the angular shape of the mask, and while you might not notice it, they actually help deflect incoming attacks. Then at the very top of the mask was a circular interface surrounded by square slots and a silver disc. However, this silver disc wasn't just for decoration. Instead, it was actually the physical locking mechanism that connected the mask to the helmet. Once secured, the helmet would seal shut, all while using a pressurized system to lock everything into place. However, this is now where things get insane. After Vader's injuries on Mustafar, nearly every part of his body was seriously damaged. His skin was burned, his lungs were destroyed, his eardrums were melted, and even his vocal cords were nearly fried. Because of this, Vader almost completely lost his ability to speak. At first, when he tried speaking, all that came out was a faint broken whisper. So, Palpatine along with his medical team had to fix that right away. Inside Vader's helmet, doctors implanted both an enunciator and an electronic voice processor, allowing him to speak. On top of that, a voice synthesizer and vocoder were added as well. Both of these deepened and amplified his speech, which created his cold mechanical tone we all know today. If it weren't for that, we'd barely be able to hear Vader, and even if we did, he wouldn't really sound as scary.
The Force is with you, young Skywalker. But you are not a Jedi yet.
Now you might be wondering though, how does he get his iconic breathing sound? Well, it's pretty interesting. Since Vader's lungs were extremely damaged, his entire suit actually functioned as a life support system, and the helmet was the core of it all. Within the triangular grille at the front of the mask sat his primary breathing apparatus. Inside of that was an air pump that connected to a flat filtration backpack hidden beneath his cloak. Together, these systems worked with one another to always cycle purified air directly into Vader's lungs, all while filtering out any toxins and waste. This process not only kept Vader alive, but it also created the mechanical breathing sound that we all know and fear today. Now, let's get into his hearing. As we mentioned earlier, Vader's eardrums were completely destroyed after his fight against Obi-Wan. As a result, his sound was distorted, almost as if he were hearing everything underwater. To fix this, Imperial doctors implanted parts taken from what's called the Soros Sub DH57 comlink. These parts included advanced audio enhancers and sonic dampeners that restored his hearing, all while protecting him from any sonic-based weapons. It's believed that Vader's hearing range extended up to 40 kHz, which is a lot more than normal humans. That kind of explains how he could sense enemies way before they even revealed themselves. Then moving further into Vader's mask, we come to his eye lenses. Since his eyes were also severely damaged, Vader was given specialized lenses that had powerful visual filters. These lenses allowed him to see in infrared and ultraviolet spectrums, giving him enhanced vision even in complete darkness. They also blocked excessive brightness, which helped protect his eyes that were already pretty damaged. Also inside the lenses was a built-in HUD that activated whenever Vader entered a new environment. This display gave him constant data on atmospheric conditions, biosignatures, and environmental threats. Then finally beneath Vader's mask was a hermetic collar wrapped tightly around his neck. You might recognize it as it's the one piece that always stayed on whenever he removed his helmet. That's because this collar was responsible for locking the helmet in place, all by using electromagnetic clamps. This collar angled forward to meet the triangular grille, which ensured a perfect seal every time. This collar, along with the helmet, was the difference between life and death for him. The torso. Moving down from the helmet, we then reached the core of Vader's armor. This section wasn't just protective plating, but it was also the central hub that kept Vader alive. See, covering his chest was a single solid plate of gray durasteel, marked by the black vertical stripes that we see across his armor. This armor was extremely durable and was capable of withstanding blaster fire and even glancing blows from a lightsaber. But that's not all. Then we get into his shoulder pads. As for his shoulder pads, these alone weighed over 25 pounds each. Now, while they provided a lot of protection, they also had some downfalls. Sadly, they restricted Vader a lot, forcing him to have to be slow and deliberate with his movements. Oh, and because they were so heavy, it was hard for him to even lift his arms over his head. Then draped over his shoulders was a heavy black pauldron secured by a dark chain wrapped around his neck. Then attached to this was Vader's iconic black armor weave cape. This cape was fireproof and flowed nearly to the floor, which added to his already terrifying presence. Then moving into Vader's midsection sat a reinforced plastoid girdle. This girdle was extremely important, as it wasn't just armor, but it also protected both his organic and synthetic organs. Ever since his injuries, he required all the protection he could get, and this girdle helped that. Then at the center of Vader's torso was the most important part of the entire suit, his chest control unit. This device regulated Vader's respiratory, circulatory, and neural systems all together. Every breath he took, every movement he made, every nerve of his, all passed through this unit. Now inside the chest panel were multiple control switches and 3 data slots. These slots allowed his medical droids to insert data wafers that could upload full system diagnostics in under a second. Once these were activated, the suit could then be used independently for weeks at a time. Then when needed, it could also be recharged through either rear access ports or a direct fusion furnace connection. Then entering beneath the outer armor, Vader wore a black ribbed jumpsuit. But this wasn't fabric. Instead, it was a 10-layered pressure-sealed suit and was designed to dampen blasts, resist fire, and protect against corrosive gases. It also regulated temperature, pressure, and absorbed any hard impacts that would otherwise shatter what remained of his body. Not only that, but Palpatine himself installed sensors into Vader that constantly monitored his vital signs. These consisted of thousands and thousands of microneedles injected all throughout his flesh, constantly scanning and monitoring Vader. So, despite how powerful Vader's suit was, it was far from perfect, and he was always in constant pain. Gloves and boots. Entering our next category, we have Vader's gloves and boots. Now, although Vader's gloves seemed pretty normal, they actually weren't. Instead, his gloves were reinforced gauntlets crafted from ancient Mandalorian iron weave. His right glove specifically was even crazier, as it was made of what's called the Mandalorian Crush Gaunt. This is how he was able to deflect Han Solo's blaster shots with just his bare hand. On top of that, it was also enhanced with Sith circuitry to increase its power. Even a single punch from that hand could crush bones and metals with ease. Now, moving down to his boots. Vader's boots were heavy all-terrain combat boots and were built to endure any environment, from volcanic plains to desert sands. They featured Durasteel shin armor for protection and magnetized soles that allowed him to cling to bulkheads. This is how we see him walk across exteriors of starships, for example, like we saw in Rogue One. Unfortunately though, because of Vader's injuries, walking was extremely hard for him. Because of his new mechanical feet, his boots barely fit him, so they had to be raised at the heel. This made it hard for him to walk, and so at times he had to call upon the Force just to be able to move around, or else he'd just tip over. Regardless of his pain though, there is one thing you might have noticed before. Whenever Vader did walk, his footsteps were extremely loud. Well, this was actually intentional, as it was a warning to anyone nearby to be afraid. Even without seeing him, you could feel his presence just by the rumble of his boots and the sound of his respirator, and if he did encounter that, you knew you had to brace yourself. With that though, that concludes our list of every single piece of Vader's suit. But I want to know from you, out of every piece of his armor, which do you think is the most iconic? His chest plate, his breathing apparatus, his helmet, or something else? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you always.